What's happening, YouTube? It's your homie S. Dot coming back to you with another video. And today's video is a very special one because I got somebody I admire highly in this game. One of the guys that I definitely look up to. As soon as I came in the game, I remember, excuse me, if you guys remember, last year on my channel I've talked about, you know, my introduction to the game. And I knew, well, excuse me, upon my introduction to the game, looking to become competitive is one of the biggest things I need to do, and I ended up finding the Defected Sigma guys and Scott, aka the Godfather. Scott, how you doing today, man?
Good.
Good. All right, sounds good, man. How you doing with this whole COVID-19 thing? You staying safe?
Yeah, it's getting more scary, I think. But
yeah, I'm about to say, yeah, absolutely. It's got to wash our hands more often, keep our hands out of our face, all that good stuff. Cool.
Yep.
Hey, well, I'm glad to have you on my first episode of my very first podcast, the Comp Camp, and throughout this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about your card history and, you know, some of your favorite cards of Wave 5. We're going to talk about some old decks you used to play, so on and so forth, and talk about, you know, some of the competitive gameplay. You down with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. All right, so to start out, we're just going to jump right into the questions. When you started, excuse me, when did you start the competitive scene? Competitive card game scene?
In 1993.
I was 4 years old.
Yep.
Cool.
I started playing Magic back in when the second expansion came out in Antiquities.
Okay.
And I went to my first tournament. Didn't even have the tournament rules down, but I think it was in between my sophomore and junior years of high school.
Wow.
And I just played real competitively since then. Since that first tournament where I didn't do very well, and then it's been ever since.
You had that drive. Nice. That's what's up.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. Okay. So how long did you play? You know, Magic. So how long did you play Magic? And
until the World of Warcraft card game came out, so probably like I want to say like 15 years.
Okay.
About 15 years, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So when accessing deck building, what are some of the ways you approach deck building from bottom to top? Or in starting, so you start with the characters, or
yep.
Okay.
So I think you start with the characters. Most of the time, I start with the characters because they are in play.
Right.
Like, so there's no doubt that you're going to get those abilities. There's no doubt that the synergies that exist between characters and your battle deck are going to happen. Mm-hmm. The variety, the variability of getting something from your battle deck is there, but you need to rely on your character abilities that are always going to be there, and then build around that, because it's basically like starting in, like, for other games, it's like starting with something in play.
Right.
So you have to maximize whatever that is. Of course, if it's just like a bunch of stats and things like that, it might be different. But like in general, if the characters force the battle deck in a certain way, you should always start with the characters and then build from there.
Okay. Okay. And at heart, you are a blue player, so I know you gravitate more towards blue decks. But
yeah,
do you enjoy playing orange decks? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean.
Or does it not matter to you, really?
It doesn't really matter, other than because I've come to find out, like, really, that there's ways to outplay your opponent in either side of the game.
Right.
I just think there's less room for. There's more variability to me on the aggro side, because like one missed attack means you probably just lose right there.
Right. Even
though it might not feel that way in the moment, it probably means that. So I feel like playing more of a control deck allows you to, like, it's not give up your mistakes, but it's more that, like, it's not that it's more forgiving. It's more forgiving on the combat side. Like, you can have bad combats and things like that. You have attacks that don't even matter and stuff like that. So it's just one bad attack doesn't ruin the game. So
okay. All right, next question. Your favorite aspect of the Transformers TCG and why? Be it, like, from example, my favorite thing of this card game is direct damage. So it could be anything from direct damage to swinging for big attacks, or defending for big defenses, or secret actions, or any other aspects. What is your favorite aspect, or aspects of the game? Could be multiple.
So my favorite aspect of the game is that it seems very basic, but in reality, it's way more complicated than that.
Yes.
Like, it's very easy to pick up the game, understand how to play,
right,
see the flip mechanics, think that it's random, things like that, but it's really not. There's so much intricacy to it once you understand what's going on. Like, all 40 cards in your deck, like, make a difference. Like, you always have to be. It's not a very forgiving game in terms of, like, the stakes and things like that. So I think that aspect where it's like a Minotaur and Lifetime the Master type thing is my favorite type thing. But in terms of card abilities, like I really gravitate towards direct and indirect damage. I call it indirect damage when it's like spread or AoE, things like that. Right. When you're not like actually being like that guy takes 2 or something like that. Right. Something like photon bomb, I call indirect damage. Because it basically allows you to get extra attacks. So if you bolt of lightning something for 3 damage, you're basically just attacked for 3 plus their defense, plus, you know, taking flips into consideration, assuming they cancel each other out. And nothing else in the game can do that. Right. So you gain such an advantage when you're constantly playing cards that damage your opponent's characters that it's like, it's even to me more of it can be more of an advantage than even like combat pumps and things like that, because the damage is completely outside of combat. You get to choose where it goes. You can hit a tapped guy, you can hit an untapped guy, etc. Like it takes the place of like a lot of other abilities all in one. Like, you know, like the Bumblebee Razor Claw abilities, like, oh, I can go attack that guy. Like, well, I can just hit him for 3 with a one-shot stand or something like that. Like, it's the equivalent. Like you're basically doing the exact same thing, except for there you're jumping through a lot more hoops. Again, this comes back to the whole, you have to draw the cards, but now we have so many of them that like, I'm not saying you should build it out with 4 direct damage cards, but you could if you wanted to.
I was going to say, wouldn't it be something like, I could see, like, with the amount of burn that we're getting now, I'm thinking similar to mono red decks in Magic. Could it be something like that? You know what I mean? Like the entire deck's like direct damage, like almost everything you do every turn is to deal damage.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you could do that before. It's just that all the colors won't be going in the same direction, but you can do it. You can definitely do it more now with a lot of the cards that are in the set.
Yeah, especially for Wave 5, absolutely. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. All right, next question. What is one of the coolest plays you've ever done in this game thus far?
So back at PAX Unplugged in 2018, when I won the first uncut sheet, the first like major event. So it was best of 1 back then, so like there wasn't as much wiggle room. I was playing the Touch 2 Tall Primes, and I remember that I was able to flip my Battlefield Legend to get back a rollout from my scrap pile, which allowed me to, or no, wait, it was...
Or you played the rollout to get a action?
Played the rollout to get back a one-shot stand.
Right.
And then played a data pad. So this is all out of nowhere. So the turn starts and like Prime has like nothing, let's just say. Doesn't really matter. So I played the rollout, get back the one-shell stand, put the data pad on Battlefield Legend, then attack. Now I'm able to put a one-shell stand from my hand on top, play it off Prime's ability, and take out 2 characters at once. Nice. That's in the same combat.
That's a feel-good. Yeah. That's a feel-good turn right there.
Yeah. Nice. So it was all facilitated by like having to play the exact right order of cards, and it just came out of nowhere. It was like everything seemed fine, and then all of a sudden he lost 2 characters, and that was like pretty much game. If it wasn't automatically game, because it was best of 1, like I said. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Favorite deck you've played thus far?
Probably the All Hell Optimist deck, the 3-wide Optimist deck from Wave 1 and Wave 2.
So the one evolved, I guess it's kind of the same thing technically. The one that evolved with the Hot Rod or the 7-star Optimist, just both in the same technically. Yeah. So I have two different things. There's a favorite deck to build and a favorite deck to play. Okay. So my favorite deck to build, I think, was probably my Gen Con deck, the General Optimist deck. Yeah, because we had tested very heavily for that event, and then I didn't come up with that deck until probably like 2 weeks before the event. Oh, wow. But we spent like 2 or 3 weeks before that basically just like knocking our heads against the wall. Like it was tough to beat like the giant bold decks, and then to still beat Insecticons, and to still beat like trying to find control strategies didn't really work real well with like press the advantage being in the environment and things like that. So like a couple weeks beforehand, I came up with the General Optimist deck, which kind of like was able to go both ways and have enough blues to like survive certain attacks and come back in certain situations. So that was my favorite deck to build because it was very iterative on having to understand a format that no one had played the format. So like we had to basically create the format and try to solve the format ourselves in a very short period of time. Now the same thing happened at EI, but it was a little bit different because like as we have more and more cards, the card pool gets, the new card pool gets less and less. So like
when that was still a third of the format and you still have all these new abilities, that's where that came into play.
Okay.
But my favorite deck to play was probably the All Hell Optimist deck, because I played it for like 6 months or something like that. And like, so when you play a deck that long, you're able to make like 1Z, 2Z type of changes to it, and then continue to iterate it until it gets more and more powerful. And that's how, like, Dan made the finals of Origins, and I know you have said said before that your deck was based on seeing it before also.
I followed that whole iteration. My favorite deck, my favorite deck to start was Double Prime, because that's how I started. That was my first taste of competitive play, and then it ended up evolving. Like, I think I saw you play at a Top Deck Games event, and I was like, I'm behind 3-wide. I'm still playing 2-wide. What is this?
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't know how to build these decks yet, so I'm just kind of just basing everything off of what you guys were doing. So yeah, seeing that, and then I was happy about that, especially. I mean, obviously, one of the main reasons why you built it was because of Insecticons, and I remember Double Prime's thing was a lot had to do with the dice roll, and Battlefield Legend needed to attack kickback. I knew all the math. I mean, it was simple math, but you played 12 cards that boosted attack or dealt direct damage. So 3 Plasma Burst, 3 one-shot stand, 3 leap into battle. I'm a big fan, if you couldn't tell. 3 leap into battle, and 3 bigger they are. And so you had 12 out of, what's the math? 12 out of your 40 cards, you had a certain percentage chance of hitting one of those cards.
It was very high.
To kill kickback. If you kill kickback off of that attack, you probably win. If you didn't, you probably lose, and that's just where you went from there. But with the evolution of the deck, obviously numbers game, 4-wide with I Still Functions, at least your opponent usually, I want to say usually, but you're going to assume they're going to see 1 per game. So they got 5-ish attacks versus your only 2 attacks. So just the numbers game surely already just beat you. But when you evolve to the 3-wide Prime deck, you still have 1 less attack, but you have your access to your direct damage, your other guys, Flame War and Starter Optimist / High Rod, were able to deal with some of the bots and kind of, make it even on that playing field and give you a fighting chance. So just and then Flame War, oh, go ahead.
They soaked up a lot of attacks too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Flame War was definitely very good for that. Hence why you see her all over the place now.
Yeah,
definitely, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, cool. How do you think the Wave 5 meta game, or Wave 5 will shape the meta game?
So now that we have a full set as of this recording, probably a little bit more than I thought it was last time we talked. There's a couple cards that came out today that I think are really going to influence it a lot. It seems like there's a way to replay 3-wide aggro, and it seems like the 4-wide aggro decks are taking a big hit.
Tripwire.
Tripwire and Hold the Line are really bad for wide decks, because if you're not getting, like, the whole point of, like, what people don't understand is, like, a wide deck is good because a wide orange deck, wide blue decks are no longer good, but, like, a wide orange deck is good because you're getting, like, even like a small airstrike patrol guy is getting, like, 8 to 9 damage, sometimes even more. Obviously, when you play, like, Grenade Launcher, Reckless Charge on a guy, like, obviously you're doing like 14, but, like, anywhere from, like, what, like 7 to 14 damage is coming out of a 4-drop, which you used to have to, like, get that out of a much higher drop. And so, like, if you're getting the same damage output out of smaller guys, then it's obviously more advantageous to play a wider deck. But when all these cards come out and you can't play them as much anymore, now suddenly 3-wide aggro comes back into vogue, and that puts, like, the typical control decks that we've been seeing on their heels, because they usually get preyed on by 3-wide aggro, but those really don't exist.
Right.
So also, like, Tripwire and Hold the Line also hurt, like, the 1 giant guy, 2 little guy decks, because, like, if you can just Tripwire one of them and tap them, then like, it's a problem. So I do see that aggro should be more, at least in the beginning, should be more effective. And I do think 3-wide aggro, especially with Titan Masters, should be pretty solid.
Do you think Tripwire is good enough? Not to take away your tech talk time, but I gotta know. You think Tripwire is will see play in orange decks? Because I feel like it could just see play in orange decks potentially too.
I think the fact that there's belligerence and now what's the blue belligerence, like?
Stop.
Like something about, like,
damn it,
not having combat or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. In hostilities.
Yeah. So I think both those cards will ebb and flow depending on the number of mixed pip decks that actually exist in the format.
Yeah.
So I think in the beginning, as people start to build decks slanted one way or the other, they'll get blown out by those cards.
Yeah.
But if they start to put more mixed pips in their decks, then suddenly that card almost doesn't mean anything anymore. If you're flipping the same amount of oranges and blues, both those cards really don't do anything.
Right.
Like, they just even out on both sides. So if we hit that point where people start to play more and more mixed decks to make those cards not as good, then I think it'll shift everything.
Yeah.
But so it's going to depend on how powerful a lot of these cards are. The only unfortunate part is like they're not green, but I think that's fine because they're also format defining that like you have to leave those up to random chance to draw them. So.
Absolutely. And something I didn't notice about in hostilities till a while ago is it's only for one battle. So it depends on how many characters your opponent's attacking you down with. I guess if they're attacking you down with 2 characters, you're just going to flip in hostilities on the one that's probably going to hurt you the most, and then you still have to take the brunt of the other attack and just hope you survive.
But I mean, a lot of times it literally just blanks your opponent's entire attack.
Yeah.
Like the way decks are built now, it will just blank your opponent's entire attack.
Right. So
like some things like Airstrike will get a little bit of buff, but like you should be able to rebuff that like with your regular defensive deck. So
absolutely.
Like if you're defending for 5 and that card's in like active, it's that attack's over.
Right. And I just love how Galaxy Prime can use it in like all your matrices are double blues, and then like same with belligerents. I don't know if you. I don't want to say I don't even know if you want belligerents when he's attacks, unless like you're really going for like a ridiculous like kill shot, because I mean you can't trigger your effect when you play belligerents because everything's orange and not orange and blue anymore. But at the same time, I mean, all your matrices are either double orange there or within hostilities are double blue. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it just helps you get around your opponent's defense.
Right, absolutely. So. And then the Galaxy Prime is already mixed, so all your sparring gears and everything just turn in blue for a turn or for like, it's pretty good.
Yep, it probably just has to be more mixed than it was before.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, cool. Now, do you think there are enough new cards to mold a new deck with more new cards in the old? Now, for example, Dave's Orange-Black Madness deck. He played 2-piece to Tyranny, and I think he played like no improvised shields because he was sincerely focused on Pierce. So do you think we're at a point where we can like play more cards and kind of exclude Wave 1? Or do you think it's still gonna go 3 security checkpoint, 3 handheld blaster to start with most decks, and then same for orange decks with improvised and piece to Tyranny? And so forth.
On the battle deck, I think you still have to rely on other sets, but on the characters, I think you can build character lineups that are entirely from this set.
Okay. That's exciting.
Because it seems that the decks a lot of the decks I built so far are actually 3 characters straight from the set. It's not just to force test them; it's
like legit
because they seem like the best options at those costs.
Right.
And a lot of them seem to have like inborn synergy with one another. Like I'm sure it was done that way on purpose. Like even the non-Titan Master characters have synergy with other Titan Master characters. So like there's just a lot of things you want to be doing, like like damaging your own guys. Well, there's multiple ways now from other characters to damage your own guys from this set without having to rely on like other sets. Because honestly, like a lot of the other sets, a lot of the small to medium guys are basically just combat enablers. Okay. Whereas here, they actually have abilities that are like more dynamic. So I think it makes for better decks. So.
Okay. Right on. I'm excited. So many different combinations. Like obviously, as we get more sets, it just gets more and more skillful to build your deck. So definitely looking forward to that. Okay. How do you feel about the Black Icon's presence now with 3 waves in? So we started with wave 3, and we got cards like Steady Shot and Smoke Cloak, and there's a couple others. But now with 3, the 3rd wave in, the Black Icon seems like it's becoming more and more relevant. And with cards like in hostilities and other things that still help blue decks out, orange decks may have to actually finally convert to like the orange-black route to make sure to get some damage in every turn or something to that effect. But what do you think about the Black Icon at this point?
So, well, I've talked about Tech Talk on this like 2x2 grid that I've created, like as to where decks lie, and it's like black pips still remain only good in one of those quadrants, which is basically when you're playing a control deck. Because if you're playing against any kind of aggressive deck, like those blacks don't do anything. Like 4 damage Pierce 3 against a 2 defense is still going to be like, that's a bad example, but like 4 damage Pierce 3 against 3 defense, for example.
Or like 9 Pierce 3 or 8 Pierce 3. Like if a blue deck defended for 6 or for like 9 or whatever, you still take 3 from that Pierce. But an orange deck,
but if it's an aggro deck,
only 2 defense, so they're going to take 7 anyway. And yeah, I got you.
And I don't know if I still don't know if we reached a point where you can attack on both axes. I think that's on purpose, right? Like, so it's almost like the aggro deck takes out the Pierce deck. The Pierce deck can handle the control decks. The control decks handles the aggro decks.
Right.
And the problem is that the Pierce decks are still so reliable on their flips or on like, you know, things going right, which is like, I have a ton of bold because they need to flip more cards, or you know, stuff that's not going to happen, like my laser cutlass needs to survive, like things that aren't other things that aren't going to happen, or like, you know, obviously we've had bigger they are forever, so like that's like the staple for it. But so like that where you have a card that gives you that much Pierce in one card, I think it's totally fine. But like having to rely on the icon means that you have to rely on bold, which means that you're susceptible to the same problems that have always existed for bold decks, which is like gyros and things like that. A lot of cards that people don't play, but you know, like Hold the Line still hurts that deck.
Right.
Yeah, like, so it just depends. Like I do think it's much better because I think you can play orange black or blue black and not have to rely solely on black icons. And then there's also a lot more cards that also key off it. Specifically like with Horrible and things like that. So I do think that there's synergies there that you don't have to rely on simply flipping a bunch of them. Like there's other things you can do with them. Right. So it's better than it was. And to me, it still comes down to like, how good is the card? Like I know that like that orange black deck played a lot of like literally unplayable cards, and like that's not really. But there's a lot of them now that are better than like even straight or orange or blue versions. So I think it's fine.
Okay. So you think it'll definitely have an impact some way, shape, or form, even if it's just a triangle, aggro beats black, black beats blue, blue beats aggro type on the surface.
Yeah, because honestly, a lot of the cards are just good, like Scouting Mission and Magnetic Disruptive Ray, and like all these other cards are literally just good cards.
Right.
So I think you're just gonna see them, and so you're gonna be like, I attack for like 6 Pierce 2, like almost every single combat. So at least you're getting some kind of damage on there, no matter what you're playing. At least. Like even if you're playing against a control deck, you're gonna get guaranteed damage, and against an aggro deck, you're gonna get less damage, but it's gonna be relevant. Especially if the format's gonna move more towards like a mixed deck anyway.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. So one team and/or strategy, or both, that you're brewing up and thinking about.
The 2 decks I've built so far, one's based around Horrible, and one's based around Perceptor. But those are the 2 characters that I'm really reaching for. So like, what I try to do when I build decks is try to get the character abilities to allow me to not play certain battle cards in my deck, or in extremely lower quantities, or like one-ofs, like, you know, 1 reprocess instead of playing a bunch of like ramming speeds and vaporizes, for example. So like when you have characters that can either draw you a bunch of cards throughout the course of the game, or mirror other combat abilities like Horrible, mirroring, direct damage, you can tailor your deck in a certain way to take advantage of those, and then allows you to play more powerful individual cards without having to worry about a bunch of other stuff. So those, the 2 decks I built so far, one's based on one character, one's based on the other, and it's trying to find the best home for them, because I do think they can fit into multiples. But a lot of my decks are starting with that character. They might have different ways of using them, but it's starting with one of those 2 characters is where a lot of it's going
right now. Okay, cool. And to just further iterate on what Scott's talking about being able to make space in your deck for other cards, a really good example of that comes right off the bat for me is Jetfire, Wave 4 Jetfire, because he is a treasure hunt. So like back in the day, we used to play 1 or 2 treasure hunts in our 3-wide prime deck to hunt for things, but now we don't have to play treasure hunt in that deck for 100% because he's a better treasure hunt. Another example is like for the new Titan Masters, like the tough 2 have the tough heads or the bold heads in general. Well, the tough heads I think is a better example, but I like the tough 2 head. If you end up playing a tough 2 head, you might not actually have to play sparring gear in your deck now, because you have a permanent sparring gear on your guy, and you can potentially focus more on the rock paper scissors armors that give you that static plus defense, or even any of the other static defensive cards. So look for abilities in your characters to where you potentially don't have to play the actual card in your deck, because his ability does that or better type thing.
Right.
So okay, right on. And one or so tip for everyone that you could that they could potentially use while playing this trading card game. One or more.
So while playing the game is different than building your deck. So I'll start with, if you want to hear both, I can give both. But
yeah.
for playing the game, I think the most important thing is that you don't have to actually play an action and upgrade every single turn.
It's a big one.
I see a lot of players, they get themselves in these overkill situations, where they're just playing combat pumps to it's going to clearly overkill a character.
This is what we call helmet. This is what we call helmet, but I'll go back to that in a second.
Okay. So they're so focused on the one time where they missed by 1 damage, so they're like, I have to reckless charge. It's like, so I can overkill by 3. Like, the number of times it's going to happen is not actually correct. And the thing that people don't understand is you draw, your opening hand and your draw leave you with such few resources in this game compared to other games,
right,
that you really can't afford to waste cards in those situations that don't help you at all. This is why I tend to play a lot of characters that give you incremental value, because you can make up for a lot of these 50-50 shots of being able to actually win through combat through character abilities.
Okay.
But the main thing is you really just don't have to play an action and upgrade every single turn. Like, you don't have to let's say you know you don't need a weapon over there, so I'm gonna go play a grenade launcher on this guy that's gonna attack next turn. Like, that's just gonna leave that grenade launcher vulnerable to removal.
Right.
So most people know that you don't want to make that play, but they don't build their decks with enough outs to not make that play. So what I mean is, this is why cards like the Matrix and gyros, and certain armors and things like certain mostly in a utility slot, certain catch-all cards. I don't want to call it utility, but that's really what they are. They're utilities.
Indeed.
Instead of if I don't need a weapon, I can go play a Matrix. So I'm still getting a +1 that'll help me, but it's going to help my team for the rest of the game. So you're making a play now that's going to help you through the rest of the game, because you don't have to concentrate so much on dropping the hammer every single turn,
right?
And wasting cards, because there just aren't. We don't have access to enough cards to waste throughout the course of a game. Even if you're playing a control deck, even if you have access to a first turn pocket processor or something like that, you still just can't afford to waste cards, because once they're gone, and you can't get them back. And I think some players they're so focused on I have to play an action and upgrade every single turn, and sometimes you just don't.
Especially if your deck is weak to, besides I know a lot of aggressive decks can't really fit draw power outside of Treasure Hunt, which is kind of draw power, and and Wedge Formation, which is actually a break even. It's not even advantage even. So sometimes not playing, and even against Shockwave, one way to actually beat Shockwave is weird, but to just not play 2 cards a turn.
Right.
Because you actually playing 2 cards a turn is kind of like you doing what Shockwave wants you to do anyway, scrapping cards. It's kind of the same. It's kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's actually a way. I've noticed some players actually catch on to that and just kind of hold back, and it kind of teaches you to not just drop all your cards on the table, which is interesting. But one example,
you can't get value at every turn, so you just have to know that.
Yeah. I think one big example I can think of is the 2 most powerful plays, action and upgrade in the game: Reckless Charge, Grenade Launcher. So Reckless Charge, let's throw Reckless Charge and Grenade in your hand, and you have a Wheeljack on the field, obviously a weapon in the scrap pile, and let's say you're attacking a Flame War with 6. Has 4 damage counters on it, which means it has 6 health left. So by simple math, just literally laying it all out one by little by little. Flame War has 1 defense and tough 1. So initially, when you flip your first 2 cards on defense, Scott, correct me, stop me anytime if I'm wrong. You flip your first 2 cards on defense, you're gonna assume that every card, if they're playing in a heavy blue deck, you're gonna assume that for every 1 they flip, they're gonna flip at least 1 blue. So with her initial 2, she's gonna have 2 extra defense, so she's gonna have 3. Add her tough 1, now she's gonna have 4. 4 plus her 6 health that she has left is 10. So 10 is the number that you want to hit. Now, obviously, you can't help when they flip a white and blues, or they flip handheld. You can't, but you can only account for what what's factual on the table. Their flips is up in the air. So you have your Wheeljack. Wheeljack has 5 attack, and you have this Grenade Launcher and Reckless Charge. You know he has Bold 3 at least, so 5 with his Bold 3 is at least going to give you 10. Where am I getting the number 10 from? You flip your first 2 initial that you get for free, that puts you at 7. And then you flip 3 more cards for his Bold 3 that should put you at 10. Then you have the Grenade Launcher that's going to put you at 14. 14 is definitely a lot higher than 10. So you don't need the Reckless Charge. So I've seen players going back in actual play. I've seen players Grenade Reckless, attack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 25.
Right.
All right.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, she's gone. She's gone.
And I always say, when I see those crazy margin of numbers, I always say, where's the steamroll? Because, I mean, like, that's just ridiculous. Like, because it's not that cool without a steamroll and doing a Grimlock effect. Yeah, sure. I think it's just a ego trip. I think it's a shot of dopamine. I've said that before. I personally think it's a feel-good for people to see how high they can get their numbers and go tell their friends about it after the match. Like, bro, I hit 20, and then when you took that 3 on your wheeljack, and then like your wheeljack probably dies because of taking that 3. If that's a game-winning play, if it's the last turn, that's a different story. You go do whatever.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's the last turn of the game. But if it's not, and like I said, your wheeljack took that 3, that could potentially lose you the game. So this, like Scott was saying, definitely make sure you you don't have to play a card every single turn, especially if it doesn't make sense. You don't need to play the last 3 cards in your hand, brainstorm to play. I don't even know what, but unless it like actually makes sense, it's really sincerely progressing your game state. Be honest with yourself. Was that a good play? Kind of ask yourself that. So.
Right. Totally agree.
Absolutely. Cool. Okay, Scott. Well, that's going to do it for my first iteration of the Comp Camp. I appreciate you being on with me, man. And this will be the portion of the podcast where I pass it off to you and any plugs that you have where people can reach you, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. It's all you.
Yeah, so Vector Sigma info is the website, Twitter, the YouTube, the podcast, everything, like SoundCloud, all that stuff now. We're working on streamlining the web. Some people are working on more articles, so like I know there's a desire for that. During everything that's going on with the stay-at-home orders, we're trying to be online live from on Tuesdays through Thursdays. So Tuesdays will be hanging out, playing games through webcams. Wednesdays will usually be chatting or more games, and then Thursday will be the live recording of Tech Talk as usual. So you can feel free to stop by for that. So we're just trying to
this week's Tech Talk is going to be huge, so make sure y'all check that out.
Yeah. So we're actually trying to do more content in the crisis that's going on because we just feel like people need a distraction.
Yes.
And we want to be mindful of that and hope that we can give people that distraction or give them something else to think about.
Absolutely.
And of course, like we have a Patreon site as well where we have some additional content on there. Usually a lot of tournament prep content and things like that that's on there for players as well.
Definitely. I always consider myself an honorary patron because I always ask you questions, well before you actually started the Patreon, and just little random things I would think about. I would hit you up and ask you about it and have me make sense of it and all that. So definitely hit these guys up. They have a lot of information that's definitely nothing to shy at. They definitely know what they're doing, and the way they think about the game is truly amazing. So props to you guys, and happy to be a part of it.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, and of course. You can hit us up on our social medias anytime you want. Like, it's not just like a Patreon-only thing or anything.
Yeah,
it's just
right.
easier to access all the time. Yeah. It was like you said, it was before we had anything like that even thought about. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Still hit him up anyway. Absolutely. Scott, man, I appreciate you. But before we go,
thanks.
You know what we got to do, man. I got to get a flex one time from you. Hey, look at that.
Hold on. Okay. I gotta pull it out.
There we go. Oh.
Only one arm this time.
Okay. Hey, look at that. I see a bulge.
It's not that bad. It's a fat man. It's a fat man workout.
Hey, muscles, man. It's all good. Hey guys, man. You guys have a great day and or night when you're catching this video. This is your homie Scott and S. Dot heading out. Peace.
Thanks. See ya.